because every one of us is different, and what's going to be helpful for me may not be helpful for you, and vice versa. And very clear on this is what is best for me, and this may not work for the next visually impaired person that you meet.
That's just really awesome that she's taken that level of effort to try and make me feel included and belong in the class so that we all can be on the same learning page.
Welcome back to Wellness Wednesday. My name is Beth Gustin, a licensed professional counselor here in Colorado, and I'm here with my co-host, Robin Ennis, a licensed clinical social worker, also here in Colorado. Today, we thought we would open up a topic around loneliness, and more specifically today, loneliness when it comes to inaccessibility, whether it's inaccessibility through technology, inaccessibility in a group setting. It is very common to feel lonely when we are in a group and surrounded by people if the material that we are discussing or experiencing isn't accessible to us. And so we thought it might be worth doing a deeper dive, if you will, or a closer look at this topic.
Right. We feel like it's a great topic because it's definitely relatable to many people. Think about it. When is there a time when you felt left out or excluded because something wasn't accessible to you? It can be very hard sitting in a group environment where you know for a fact that people around you are able to have a level of information that you're not able to participate. I can imagine from personal experience that it is very isolating and you feel very lonely because you feel different from the group. And it's definitely not a fun feeling. And so that's when it really boils down to advocating. And I know just people in general, especially those with varying abilities, are constantly advocating for themselves and even other people. And this is one example where advocating your needs and experiences can be in the right environment if they're receptive to hearing from you.
I was at a retreat over the weekend, and we were looking at pictures, and those were not accessible for me. And one of the people that was running the retreat asked me, how can we make this more accessible, or how can we make this more inclusive so you can gain more out of it? And I really appreciated her asking that question, being open to my feedback. And it got me thinking about sometimes there is no way to make something accessible, like pictures. I mean, they can be described to us, and that was helpful to me in this experience, but it still didn't convey the content, I guess, if you will, in a way that made sense to me with the topic being discussed, because the pictures are open to interpretation of the person describing them to you. So we're getting the perspective of that person's opinion of a picture. And it was helpful, but it got me thinking about, okay, so I'm grateful this person asked for my opinion. It helped me advocate for myself and gave me an opportunity to talk to the person about how to make things more inclusive. And it also made me think about the loneliness around there is no way to make some things accessible, and what do you do with that? And I think for me, it just helped to know that someone cared enough to ask and was willing to learn. That went a long way towards helping that loneliness a little bit and decrease. It didn't solve the problem, but I felt better. That makes any sense to anyone because I need more coffee.
It makes complete sense. I was nodding my head actually on the same page. I was thinking the same thing because it is all about empathy, that level of understanding and meeting the person where they're at. And it sounds like that retreat, the organizers were very aware and really tried to meet you where you're at by understanding your needs so that they can better improve their programs, which is very important. And I know in situations where that's happened to me, that's made me feel more appreciated or feel like I belong more. And I really like my doctorate program right now because I haven't been in a school where the level of just them embracing inclusiveness and trying to meet me where I'm at. I don't think that I have experienced that from so many professors. In my undergrad and grad, I did have some really great professors who did, but it seems like a lot within this program so far have strived to do that. And I mentioned that because Beth, you mentioned about pictures. And so one of my professors now, she's my first one who's done this so far. And I'm in my second semester. In her PowerPoint, she created alt text because she had pictures in there to try and help me. And I didn't even ask her to do that. And I was like, wow, that's just really awesome that she's taken that level of effort to try and make me feel included and belong in the class so that we all can be on the same learning curve or same learning page.
I agree. And I think as inclusivity is becoming more talked about, with the diversity, equity, inclusivity, I think we are seeing more people learning about how to make things accessible and taking those extra steps to do that. I also think there's a long way to go. But one thing I try to do, even if it's like an app developer, for example, or it's a professor, or it's an organizer, I make a probably over the top effort to thank them or find a way to thank them. Because I think for me, that's at least a way of acknowledging, hey, I noticed and I appreciate it. I think the other side of it is how do we bring up those conversations when something isn't accessible and someone isn't as approachable about it? And how do you advocate for yourself so that you do feel more included and less lonely? And I think that can be harder. One thing I have found helpful from this standpoint is just to be like, hey, can I buy you a cup of coffee and let's talk further about kind of how I can gain more out of the material that you worked so hard to put together and that you're sharing. And so I incorporate my ask for let's talk about this with a compliment of what they've put together. I'm not saying it's right or it's wrong. That's just the way I do it.
Yeah. When you had mentioned, thanking people for their efforts. And so I definitely try to do that too. I think that's important from a strengths base, right? Is acknowledging people's strides so that they can continue to do that. And then when they continue to do it, then hopefully the aim is that other people around them will model off of that behavior. So even, if I'm going out to lunch with friends and I notice that a server tells me where they place my drink or whatever, I make sure I thank them. Even in my classes now, when I've noticed that peers have made a greater stride to describe what's on their PowerPoints, if it's visual content, I will thank them. And Beth, correct me if I'm wrong when you mentioned that when you do approach people who may be more resistant or less open to constructive feedback, that a way to do that is kind of lowering their guard by inviting them to coffee. That sounds like the sandwich.
Yes, it does.
Okay. And that's one thing that I do too. That's my favorite. So for those of you who don't know, the sandwiches is when you have, like, let's say your compliments are 2 pieces of bread, right? And the meat of the discussion is areas of improvement. And so it's sandwiched in between 2 compliments to kind of help lower the person's guard and make them feel more open and receptive to hearing what you're saying so they won't feel criticized.
I think it's all about how you approach it. I think most of us are open to hearing constructive feedback, but none of us want to be criticized. And so I think it's about how do you approach it? How do you bring it up? Can you offer solutions? For example, we were doing some exercises where we had some hand motions to go with something we were learning. And I was thinking, I didn't say this at the time. I wish I would have. But if someone could have taken me aside or had me be the volunteer and then taken my hands and showed me where to place them or what the hand motion was. I did get that from those I was with. So I did learn it. But if I hadn't been there with people that I knew, I'm thinking ahead for like next time or another situation, maybe offering, if you're willing, to go up front and have them directly show you what is being done. This is an example, like an exercise class or Pilates or Tai Chi. Sometimes it can be helpful if someone just takes our hands and walks us through the motions. We can follow that better than someone describing things. But it takes a level of courage, I think, for us to step up and say, hey, I like this. Here's what actually would help me participate better. And thank you for blah, blah, blah.
It does take a lot of courage because you don't know what the other person's reaction is going to be. I do want to digress a little bit and go back to, Beth, what you mentioned about the hand motions. And so even for online formats, virtual formats, that level of participation is still very much possible by making sure that people with whatever type of disability that they have those materials ahead of time so that people who are in the environment can be able to practice or show them what is expected. And that can help preparation too. Kind of going off of what you're saying, Beth. For me, I am a non-confrontational person. And so that's something that I continually work on, right? So it's hard for me to push myself if I know, and when I get that inkling by somebody's tone of voice or that they may be less approachable, but I know that it's important for me to relay that message. It can be intimidating. And so, Beth, one question that popped up in my head is, how do you feel, because this has happened to me countless of times of being the only blind individual in the room. How do you navigate that where it can be teachable moments, but then also to, as one of my professors said, because she had asked me in front of the class about, accessibility. And she said, I don't want to tokenize you. So how do you navigate that? I know I say, well, I appreciate the questions and I don't feel tokenized, and I'm speaking from my own personal experiences that where, maybe some other individuals with visual impairments are facing the same things, but this is what's helpful to me. So that's how I try and navigate that. But have you ever faced that pressure, or have people approached you in regards to being, quote unquote, the representation of blind people?
Quite often, yes. And I handle it very much the same way that you just described, because every one of us is different, and what's going to be helpful for me may not be helpful for you, and vice versa. And so I'm very clear on thanking them for bringing up the topic, and very clear on this is what is best for me, and this may not work for the next visually impaired person that you meet, but being open to helping them be open to other perspectives. And yes, this is what helps me the most in this situation.
Yeah.
And I find that approach works really well. And it's none of us know what we don't know. And so I think also what helps kind of handle this topic a little better is if we can approach it from a place of everyone is very well intentioned and doesn't know what to do. We're all just trying our best to navigate sometimes unforeseen circumstances or unforeseen, interactions or events that can go smoother in the future. But we have to start with where we're at and be willing to kind of dive in and get messy.
Yeah, I agree. It is good that people ask questions versus assuming where stereotypes or judgments can occur. So yeah, we don't know what we don't know. So that's why it's good to learn from each other.
So speaking of not knowing what we don't know, are there topics that you would like us to talk about, that you'd like to learn more about, or you'd like us to do a deep dive about? Because we don't know what you don't know, and we don't know what you want to know. And so we are always open to hearing your feedback and suggestions and questions and comments, and we do get them. So I encourage you to please reach out to us and let us know what's helpful. Are there topics you'd like us to go back and take a closer look at or talk more in depth about, or topics that we haven't covered that you think would be helpful to hear about?
Yes, well said, Beth. And so if you want to reach out to us, feel free to email us or call us. I definitely want to hear from you. We learn from each other. As always, feel free to reach out.
And until we speak again, take care and stay grounded.
Yes, until next time, take care.
Oh yeah, Wellness Wednesday with Beth and Robin. Gonna settle it down. Oh yeah, get your feet planted on the ground.
For more podcasts with the blindness perspective, check us out on the web at www.blindabilities.com. And be sure to subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you want to leave us some feedback, give us a call at 612-367-6093. We'd love to hear from you. Thanks for listening, and until next time, bye-bye.
Wellness and taking care of ourselves. It's all about you and taking care of yourself. Oh yeah.
When we share
what we see
through each other's eyes, we can then begin to bridge the gap
between the limited expectations and the reality
of blind abilities.